What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and home league drafts are fully underway. A lot of them have happened this past weekend. A lot of them are about to be kicking off Labor Day weekend, and I want to make sure you guys are as prepared as possible. I imagine a lot of you guys are watching these videos, cramming right before your draft, and you want to know who to draft. You don't have all the time to look through my must draft videos, my please draft this player, my breakout running back videos, so this video, the objective here is to give you one player that is my favorite target in each round of your fantasy draft. So you just have a list of players that you should be targeting in each round. So with all that being said, if you enjoy, make sure to get down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go. Now, the way that we compiled these consensus ADPs, right, because we're going to talk through each round, and we have to figure out, what player goes in each round. I made the consensus ADP, or the consensus pre-draft rankings from the three most popular home league platforms: ESPN, Sleeper, Yahoo. CBS and NFL.com were too low for me to want to include. It took me a ton of time to go in and compile the pre-draft rankings. I could have done the ADP, but I instead did the default pre-draft rankings, so it's probably a little bit closer to what your home league might look like. A lot of guys in there are just going to kind of take the highest players in the pre-draft rankings. So, with that being said, let's get to our first target here, Bijan Robinson. Now, I'm going to have these targets highlighted in green throughout the video. He is my 106 is my RB2. He is the aggregate rank here. So, again, Yahoo, Sleeper, ESPN, their average. And you just have their aggregate rank. So, just consensus first round of fantasy football drafts in 2023 look like this. And Bijan Robinson's my 106. Now, by the way, if you have a home league draft coming up, make sure you check out patreon.com/Ron Stewart. My top 200 rankings for half PPR and full PPR are fully up to date for the Jerry Jeudy news, the JSN news, the Josh Jacobs news, everything you need. It's fully up to date. It's ready to go. And for each player, every green player in this list that's highlighted green is bolded in the rankings as big targets for me. So the rankings themselves, they are rankings, but then you also have my targets and my avoids all highlighted on there, and then my target draft round for each player. It's the rankings, checklist, cheat sheet, whatever you want to call it, that I'm bringing with me into every single draft. My home league draft, my underdog drafts, my high stakes drafts, all of it. So we talked about Bijan Robinson here. We talked about him a ton in our breakout running back video, but I wasn't going to highlight, of course, Jefferson, Chase, CMC are all great picks. But then once they're off the board, and once Kupp and once Tyreek Hill are off the board, Bijan's the guy for me at the 106. Now, I think that Sam Sherman here had a really good point, just sort of summing up how I feel about Bijan. He said, fading one of the best running back prospects of the past decade, Bijan Robinson, because of fourth-round converted linebacker Tyler Algier, will go down as one of the biggest mistakes for fantasy drafters in 2023. This is the prince who was promised, 8th overall running back in an era where Breece Hall and Jonathan Taylor were second-round picks. Amazing prospect, size, speed, pass catching. He is everything and more. And when we look at just players drafted in the top 12 since 2012 via Dwayne McFarland's here, we're drafting Bijan to be our RB1 at top 3 prices here. And you have a ceiling of anywhere from RB1 overall. Saquon Barkley at 24 points per game. That would have been the highest point per game season since 2020 last year. Ezekiel Elliott had a great season as well. And then you have a bunch of top 5 and top 7 finishes from Fournette, Gurley, McCaffrey. So he has a great floor, Bijan Robinson. He's also probably the most likely 101 running back candidate among all of the first-round running backs. If you had to guess who would be the 101 next year between him, McCaffrey, Eckler, and Chubb, it'd probably be Bijan Robinson, which is important. And then he also has super high upside as a young running back in a league where a lot of the best running backs are old and past their prime. So I like Bijan Robinson to be in the mix for RB1 overall. He goes to an Arthur Smith offense that had a ton of success with Derrick Henry, but this time Bijan Robinson will be involved in the passing game much more than a Derrick Henry. The Falcons sneakily have the 10th best offensive line on Establish the Run, and Arthur Smith has had really efficient run games in the past. To me, Bijan Robinson is my biggest target in round 1. Now, moving on to round 2, we have Tony Pollard. People were coming at me in the last video. We talked about the worst picks in every round, and all of them are running backs. Well, look, 2 of the best picks in the first 2 rounds for my money are running backs. We have Tony Pollard here, who is the consensus 204 as the RB7. He's my 112 as my RB4. So I'm 4 spots higher. That's nothing crazy, but early on it is sort of crazy. And 3 spots at running back higher than consensus here. And this is a guy who is a super, super talented running back with a good case to finish as the RB1 overall this year, one of the legendary running back or legendary upside running backs, I believe, this year. He was the RB8 in points per game last year with just a 48% opportunity share, which was 34th among running backs. He was 34th in opportunity share, 8th in points per game. He made the most of his touches, and he's now going to be the main back for the Dallas Cowboys. This is a good offense with Dak Prescott. This is an offense as well that has the 6th highest offensive line ranked on established to run. It's going to be a good offense, good offensive line. Real lack of competition here. We're talking like Deuce Vaughn, who is a rookie, day 3 rookie. Rico Dowdle, who you guys probably don't even know who Rico Dowdle is. And Malik Davis. Like all guys who have combined nothing to show for in the NFL. Pollard is the main guy here. And he's one of the best pure rushers in the NFL as well. This is EPA per rush and rushing yards over expected over the last 2 years among all running backs with 200 or more carries. Tony Pollard is in this range of Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones, Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler, Christian McCaffrey as one of the best pure rushers in the NFL. Now, yards over expected per rush is just you're expected for a certain amount of yards based on how many defenders are in the box, you're blocking, and then EPA per rush is how much are you supporting winning for your team? You know, how much are you adding on top of what you're expected in a given drive or a given game for your offense? And he just absolutely crushes it. And then on top of that, Zeke ran 234 routes last year to Pollard's 245. You have to assume that Pollard now absorbs the third down, 2-minute drill type of role, and he's a really good pass catcher. He was top 10 in yards per out run last year, top 10 in receiving grade, passer rating when thrown to, yards per reception, and if he takes over a full passing down workload and he now can have like an Eckler Kamara type workload of like 70+ catches, flirting with like a 1,100, 1,200 rushing yards and a ton of touchdowns, he will absolutely crush in 2023. Now, our third round target here is Calvin Ridley, who's going way too late in home leagues. He is my 211 as my wide receiver 15. He is the aggregate rank 312 here. And this is a guy in Calvin Ridley who is going in the second round in high stakes leagues. He's going in the second round on Underdog. Make sure you guys are checking out Underdog Fantasy as well. It's the best way to get prepared for your home league drafts. It's a best ball site, so you draft your team, and best ball means it sets your best lineup every single week. There's no waivers. There's no setting your lineups. There's no trades. Nothing. You draft your team, and that's it. It's a great way to get practice in because all of the ADP is made from paid leagues with real money on the line, and everyone's 18 plus and 21 plus. So there's no auto drafting. There's no kids on the site. There's nobody taking kickers in the third round. The ADP is as sharp as ever, so you can hop in there. You can see that Calvin Ridley's a 2-3 turn guy, and then in your home league, you look up at the 312, at the 401, at the 402, and you see Calvin Ridley there, and you know something's wrong. So you can just kind of condition yourself to know where players should be going in sharper leagues. So make sure you check out Underdog Fantasy. Promo code RON gets you a deposit match up to $100. I'll have a link in the description and the comment section down below. But Calvin Ridley in these consensus ADPs is a 312. And there, he's an absolute smash. I get that he hasn't played football in a season and a half, and that's the big risk with him, but it's baked in. Again, on these sites where there's actual money on the line, he's like the 211, the 212. You're getting that risk baked in here, getting a full round discount. He is going to be the wide receiver 1 attached to Trevor Lawrence, what should be a good offense with high passing volume here. And Matt Harmon, reception perception, he does great stuff there where he charts wide receivers. And in Calvin Ridley's last year where he was playing, he looked fine. 87th percentile versus man, 76th percentile versus press. And Matt Harmon said there's a narrative that Ridley wasn't playing well or wasn't holding up in a number 1 wide receiver role in his first full season without Julio Jones in Atlanta. Never mind that Ridley was awesome in 2020 and didn't play with Jones for much of that season. That narrative is false, and reception perception proves it. Ridley checked in with a 76.4% success rate versus man, 80.5% versus zone, 75% against press. Those are all fantastic results and right in line with that dynamic 2020 season. Ridley is a fantastic route runner who earns separation consistently. His success rates are just below the elite players in the NFL. Last time we saw him was really good. He also commanded a ton of volume, where if you look at expected points per game, which is just how much targets you're absorbing with your ADOT, how many points should you be putting up, he was at 17.2 expected points per game in 2021. He didn't score a ton of points. Like he was really below that in FPOE per game, which is fantasy points over expected. But that's because that passing offense was pretty brutal, and he was dealing with some things on and off the field. But he was still demanding volume at a top 5 rate. That would have been the wide receiver 4 in expected points per game in 2021. He, to me, feels a lot like a late career Stephon Diggs, where Stephon Diggs, it took a little bit to hit that first 20-plus point per game season. It wouldn't shock me if Calvin really started flirting with that in 2023. Now, moving on to the 4th round here, we have Breece Hall as the 403, RB16 by consensus. He's my 312 as my RB12 by consensus. So 4 running back spots higher than consensus and a couple round slots here. And this is a guy who, before tearing his ACL last year, was an absolute monster as a rookie. Through the first 7 weeks, he was the RB8 with 17 points per game. He wasn't even officially starting at running back until week 6. And over the entire year, he had under a 50% snap share, under that entire 7-game sample, under 50% of the snaps. He wasn't even the starting offense or the starting running back in this offense, and was still the RB8 with 17 points per game in his first 7 games as a rookie. Now he gets to be in the Aaron Jones role in this Aaron Rodgers offense with Nathaniel Hackett here. Aaron Jones had a couple of top 5 finishes while splitting a lot of work with Jamal Williams. I imagine sort of a similar split here with Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook doesn't completely, take away the upside here. If Breece Hall is as explosive, efficient, talented as we know he is, he's catching passes and he has a role in the goal line, then he's going to smash, even if this is like a 55-45 split or a 60-40 split, especially given the fact that you can draft him in the 4th round. Now, I'm not really scared of Dalvin Cook being the lead back here. This is a guy since his 2020 season has just been downhill, PFF grade downhill, rushing yards over expected, 10-plus carry percentage, yards per out run. He is on the back half of what was a good career. He's dislocated his shoulder in each of the last few seasons. He's only played 1 full season in the NFL. He gets hurt all the time. I'm just not going to fade Breece because of a running back past his prime coming in here. The ceiling and the floor remain the same for Breece Hall. It's simply this. If the ACL is bad and he can't shoulder a workload and he's not the same guy, then Dalvin Cook is going to take over this full job or full-time role and be the guy. But even before Dalvin Cook, if this was the case for Breece Hall, he wouldn't have paid off anyways. And then the ceiling is still the same. If Breece Hall is the guy that we saw last year, he is going to be a top 5 running back in fantasy football from weeks like 7 through 17. And after Dalvin Cook shoulders the workload early on and works Breece Hall to where he should be, Breece Hall is going to absolutely explode. They're not going – this is a 1-year deal. I know everyone's caught up on the amount of money they gave Dalvin Cook. Aaron Rodgers took a pay cut, and Corey Davis retired. They had plenty of money to mess around with. This was a luxury 1-year deal. They're not going to look up in week 10 and be like, oh, man, we're spending $8 million on Dalvin Cook. We got to use him. No, that money's already spent. There's no long-term investment. There's nothing there that would give the Jets any more reason to play him. It's not Zeke Elliott where they have him for 3 more years, when during the Pollard years. He's just a short-term signing to give Aaron Rodgers a veteran presence in the backfield. That's all this is. So it feels like the discount's baked in, right? It's not like you're paying 2nd-round prices for Breece Hall. 4th-round prices for a guy who could be a top 5 running back down the stretch of a season, to me, is an absolute smash candidate. Now, moving on from that, we have our 5th-round player here, Christian Watson. He is consensus is 504 as the wide receiver 23. He is my 404 as my wide receiver 21, and he's one of my favorite year 2 breakout candidates. Ryan Heath had a great article that I've been referencing recently on Fantasy Points, showing where wide receiver breakouts happen, kind of how age affects his fantasy football. And we can see years 2 and 3 are the biggest breakout years for wide receivers in fantasy football. Christian Watson fits the bill as a year 2 guy who was just an absolute monster last year. If we look at games where wide receivers only played 60% of the snaps or 60% or more of the snaps, there's a guy in Christian Watson who was hurt a bunch last year, and just early on in the season, he just couldn't get healthy. He had a concussion and some scrapes and some bruises. But in games where he played, he was a monster. He was the wide receiver 8 in points per game in games of 60% or more of the snaps here, right next to Keenan Allen, ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown, ahead of CeeDee Lamb, and that was as a rookie wide receiver last year. Now, he was also, over the entire year on a per route basis, really dominant as well. He was the wide receiver 12 in targets per out run, the wide receiver 13 in yards per out run. Now, the only holdup for me is that he is in an offense with Jordan Love at QB, and we don't know what the post-Aaron Rodgers Packers looks like. But in the 5th, 6th rounds here, especially in the 5th round, I'm all over Christian Watson. This is a guy who goes in the 4th round in a lot of high stakes and underdog leagues. To me, he's fine to take the swing on here. You kind of just have to bet on the talent and hope that everything else figures itself out. Now, in the 6th round, we have Darren Waller, who I just keep on inching up in the rankings. He's going at 608 as the tight end 6 by consensus. He's my 505 as my tight end 3. Now, he's been battling injuries, but I think one of the best reasons to buy into Darren Waller is because most of the top tight ends stay as the top tight ends. And what I mean by this was touched on by David Gazziari here. He said Waller has multiple 1,000-yard seasons on his resume, including a 107, 1196, and 9 touchdown on 145 targets in 2020. He finished 6th in the NFL in targets that year and averaged 17.4 fantasy points per game. So that's his absolute ceiling. Now, he said being a repeat performer at tight end is huge. There have been 38 instances of a tight end scoring 15 or more fantasy points per game since the year 2000, and 28 of them were by the same 7 tight ends. So 28 of 38 15-plus point per game seasons has all been hogged by just 7 tight ends. Tight ends who have done it before are the most likely to do it again, and that's why you want to bet on Darren Waller, who isn't washed at this point. He's just been battling injuries the last 2 years. The Giants paid big boy draft capital for him. They traded a third-round pick. We just saw pretty recent first-round picks in Isaiah Simmons and Trey Lance both go for day 3 picks. So this is real investment here for the Giants to use Darren Waller, and it seems like they will. He's drawing live to be the best receiver in that receiver room. The receiver room is weak. He is the biggest receiver they have. He's probably the best receiver they have. He's, in my eyes, drawing to finish as like the number 1 target, receptions, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns on the Giants. And we know that Brian Daboll is going to maximize all of the players he has on his offense. To me, Darren Waller is an absolute smash pick. He's been creeping up into the 5th round a lot of places. I think if he's still going in the 6th round of your home league, you have to take him there. Now, in round 7, one of my favorite running backs to take as my RB2 in a hero RB build this year is DeAndre Swift. He's the consensus 708 as the RB31. He's my 702 as my RB23. So we're like half a round higher than consensus and like 8 running back spots higher than consensus. This is a running back who is the lead back right now, the featured back on the NFL's best rushing offense with the number 1 established to run offensive line ranking, and nobody cares. This is also a guy who you can take in the RB30 range who has never finished lower than RB15 in points per game. And he finished RB15 in points per game last year on a 41.8% snap share, which was 42nd in the NFL. He was on the bad side of a 60-40 split, and he still was the RB15 in points per game. I've been really coming around on Swift. Him potentially being the lead back grows even more as like Rashad Penny's like maybe a cut candidate now. Like they're talking about Rashad Penny as a cut candidate, and it just feels like Kenneth Gainwell keeps on rising up, and nobody's really moving DeAndre Swift up. DeAndre Swift, to me, is an absolute smash. I think between the tackles, he's much, much better than Gainwell. And Gainwell's only going to take away from the receiving workload. And I sort of trust Swift to get his in the receiving game. He always had, even last year, in a really split offense. So DeAndre Swift, to me, one of the best picks right now in all of fantasy football. Going on to round 8, this is going to start the trend of us looking at a lot of rookie wide receivers. We have Jordan Addison. He is consensus 806 as the wide receiver 39. He is my 606 as my wide receiver 32. And you're going to see a lot of rookie wide receivers the rest of this list here. And it's because of this. This is a great chart from Jack Miller, and it just shows rookie wide receivers backloaded their fantasy points, right? You can see the line goes up, whereas veterans fall off as the year goes on. Rookies are cheat codes on the back half of a season. We've seen this before as well, where if you look since 2019, there have been on average 3 rookie wide receivers each year that are in the top 24 wide receivers in points per game from weeks 10 on, and a lot of them are drafted outside the top 40, right? Justin Jefferson was the wide receiver 56. He was the wide receiver 4 in points per game from week 10 on. Amon-Ra St. Brown was the wide receiver 78. He was the wide receiver 5 in points per game from week 10 on. You can just see all the way down the board, you're getting massive, massive values for these late season hammers, and I think Jordan Addison has a great case to be one of these late season hammers as a really strong prospect. He was drafted in the 1st round. He has a like trump card skill set where he is a really good route runner. He's going to get separation. A lot of these teams are going to focus a ton on Justin Jefferson, give him bracket coverage, give him safety help. And you're going to see Jordan Addison tear up some of these secondary, tertiary, whatever you want to call them, corners out there and do really well. There's a ton of volume to go around. After what Jefferson takes, this is a team that was top 3 in pass attempts last year, top 10 in scoring. There is plenty to go around in this passing offense. To me, Jordan Addison comes in and can kind of do what Adam Thielen did early on in Jefferson's career. Now, moving on to round 9, we have Quentin Johnston, one of the guys that I'm drafting a ton this year. He's going at the 908 as the wide receiver 45 by consensus. He's my 709 as my wide receiver 40. So like 2 rounds higher than consensus, 5 wide receiver spots. Similar idea here, rookie wide receiver, tons of upside, and they're both in good offenses, Addison and Quentin Johnston, where Quentin Johnston's going to be getting footballs thrown to him by Justin Herbert in a Kellen Moore offense. This offense is going to be high scoring, pass happy, everything. It's going to be amazing. And Quentin Johnston has one of the most unique skill sets I've ever seen, where he is somebody where missed tackles forced rate and average up the target and just yak and average up the target have a negative correlation, right? Your low ADOC, like a Deebo Samuel type, is going to make a lot of guys miss. But you have like a Chris Olave who is going to go down the field and then fall down. Not usually do you have a guy who is both, where it's like Chris Olave down the field, then he has like the Deebo after the catch ability. That's usually very, very rare. And Quentin Johnston has that, and that's what makes him so exciting. You're going to have massive plays where he catches the ball 25 yards downfield, stiff arms of safety. He's like 6'3", 210 pounds, 208 pounds, and he can just absolutely manhandle the secondary and just break off these huge plays while a lot of the coverage and a lot of the defense's resources are going to be on Eckler, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. So I love Quentin Johnson this year. And we talk about that late season skill set. He can climb up the depth chart. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen have both been injured a ton the last couple seasons here. So it wouldn't surprise me at all for like somebody to get hurt, Quentin Johnson to slide in, and then be a league winner down the stretch. Now we have another rookie here. 10th round, Zach Charbonnet. Consensus is 10.05 as the RB39. He is my 902 as my RB35. And it's a similar idea here with like the rookie wide receiver. Same thing for rookie running backs. We saw last year Kenneth Walker was an absolute stud after like the first 6 weeks or so when Rashad Penny was still there and still healthy. But then he was an absolute workhorse down the stretch. And Jonathan Taylor too, where he sucked for like the first 8 to 10 weeks and then he was a monster. Zach Charbonnet is someone I want to bet on. This is a guy like, yes, he's in the same backfield as Kenneth Walker, but here's why I like him a bunch. It's going to be a good offense. We just want to bet on running backs and good offenses. And he has the skill set to take the high-value touches. We want touchdowns. We want receiving work in fantasy football. Zach Charbonnet is drawing live for both of them. First of all, 93rd percentile in college when it comes to pass catching, that college target share. Kenneth Walker had 19 catches in his entire college career. Zach Charbonnet had 37 in just his senior year at UCLA, and he had 24 in his junior year at UCLA, both beating Kenneth Walker's entire career. So Zach Charbonnet is already a better receiving back than him. He's also 6 foot, 214 pounds. He's a bigger back than Kenneth Walker, who was this very boom-bust runner last year. He was bottom 3 in success rate, which just means on a given play, is he going to get what's blocked? And he was a boom-bust guy where he had like a ton of huge plays, but that's not in short yard situations on the goal line what you want. You don't want the guy that can bust it for 60 yards because that's not an option at the goal line. You don't want the guy who's bottom 3 in success rate on the goal line. So that's what he brought Zach Charbonnet to do. Pete Carroll, where Zach Charbonnet is a very steady running back. He's not going to give you the 60-yard runs, but in close, he's going to get the job done. He's going to catch passes. So to me, if you have a guy who's going to see goal line work and catch passes and a good offense on the Seahawks and has rookie upside, I'm all in. Moving on, we have round 11 here, Rashad Bateman, who is just absolutely insane going in the 11th round. He is my 806 as my wide receiver 45. He is consensus 11-11 as wide receiver 56. So we're like 2.5 rounds higher and like 11 wide receiver spots higher. He's my most drafted wide receiver on Underdog, and he is one of my favorite year 3 breakout candidates, which we just talked about with Christian Watson, but year 3 is actually the biggest breakout year, and that's why I love Rashad Bateman here as just an absolute smash candidate. He's going to be in this revamped Ravens offense I want to be betting on a ton. We see they've changed offensive coordinators from Greg Roman to Todd Monken. It should be many more pass attempts. It should be a faster-paced offense. It should be more 3 and 4 wide receiver sets. And when you let Lamar Jackson throw the ball with the most weapons he's had yet, where it's going to be Bateman, OBJ, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, it's going to be an amazing passing offense. I think one of these Baltimore wide receivers is going to be absolutely massive this year. I like betting on Bateman because he's the cheapest one, and he was also an elite first-round wide receiver prospect coming into the NFL. And even though last year he got hurt early on, he showed a ton of promise on a per-route basis. He was 12th in yards per out run, and he was 18th in targets per out run. So if any of that translates this year in this like new modern offense, Rashad Bateman could absolutely crush. Then we have the 12th round, and we have Jaylen Warren, who's been getting a ton of buzz recently. He is the aggregate 1204 as the RB47. He's my 910 as my RB37. So I am like 2.5 rounds higher, 10 running back spots, and he's just a smash anywhere in the double-digit rounds. He feels a ton like Pollard with Zeke and Eckler with Gordon, where he's not going to surpass them, but he's going to be very annoying, and he's going to be an absolute monster if Najee was to go down. If we just sort of compare what they did last year, Jaylen Warren just blows him out of the water. Rushing yards over expected, crushes Najee Harris. EPA per rush, crushes Najee Harris. He just has a lot more juice. I think he's going to be annoying in passing downs for Najee Harris. I think he can sort of carve out like a RB3-ish PPR role, and then if Najee was to ever go down, Jaylen Warren would be a top 12 option at worst on a weekly basis. Then, more rookie wide receivers. Round 13, we have Jonathan Mingo, who is the aggregate 13-11 as the wide receiver 65. He is my 1209 as my wide receiver 55, so 10 spots higher in terms of wide receiver rankings, about a round higher in rankings. And Mingo is already on the field as a starting wide receiver, so he's going to get a good amount of games to sort of ramp up here, where he's going to be on the field early. He can kind of work out his mistakes and then crush down the back half of a season. And DJ Chark is already banged up, so he was already wide receiver 3. Chark is banged up. Mingo is going to be fully in the mix as early as week 1, and this is the perfect upside swing. Top 40 pick in the NFL draft, which is really good, and he profiles like a bigger, or not a bigger A.J. Brown, but one of these like hulking A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuels. Like, he is not, like, in this draft class, we've seen a lot of smaller guys, JSN, Addison, Zay Flowers, all like sub 200 pounds. This is your X wide receiver, 220 pounds, 6'1", 4'4" speed, more explosive than A.J. Brown. Like, he's a freak. He was drafted in the top 40. The Panthers have incentive to use him, and he has a ton of upside. Now, he didn't really grade well in my prospect model. I don't think that he's that great of a long-term bet, but we're talking 13th round in a redraft league. I'm taking nothing but home run swings, and Jonathan Mingo is that. Now, we have another rookie wide receiver here for our round 14 player, which is Marvin Mims. He is, what the damn hell? All right, I think we're good. I think we'll power through, fellas. I hope that that hasn't been happening the entire video, because if it has, I'm going to be mad. All right, I think we're good. But we have Marvin Mims. He is, consensus is 14-12 as the wide receiver 70. He is my 1208 as my wide receiver 54. So we're like 2 rounds higher, like 16 wide receiver spots higher. And this was a guy who was a really, really strong prospect. 2nd round pick, early declare, produced every year at Oklahoma, produced early right away. And he profiles a lot like a wide receiver that Russell Wilson likes. Both around 5'10", 180 pounds, Tyler Lockett and Marvin Mims, both about 4'4" speed. Marvin Mims is more explosive. He was also drafted in the 2nd round instead of Tyler Lockett, who was in the 3rd. Marvin Mims is a better prospect, looks a lot like Tyler Lockett as one of these downfield, smaller burners, and that's absolutely perfect. We now have a Judy injury, so Mims is going to get routes right away, just like Mingo, and we're going to know right away if Mims has it or not, and if he does have it, then he is going to be a very fun rookie to start in fantasy football. Now we have like our sort of dart throws here around 15+. I haven't gotten to talk about him much, but we have Juwan Johnson at 1506 as a tight end 20. He's my 1305 as my tight end 19. So I'm just sort of prioritizing him a little bit, but he's been getting a lot of buzz here. And this is a really cool chart from Sam Hoppen over at Fantasy Pros where it shows Juwan Johnson. We want guys who run routes and don't run block a ton. We want guys who do run block a ton and then also run a ton of routes because they're going to be on the field running routes with everybody else. Yeah, I think that that's what the chart says. Yeah. So you want everybody in that top right, because those are guys who are going to be running routes and involved in the passing game. And Juwan Johnson's in that top right quarter. Now, he's not like firmly in there, but he's like around other guys who are interesting. And this is a guy who is a converted wide receiver, runs a sub 4.6, and he was the tight end 7 from week 7 through 18 last year. So he's really interesting in this new offense with Derek Carr. Juwan Johnson's been getting a lot of buzz. If you need a late round tight end, you just completely punt. I think that he's a great option as well. And then we have Ty Chandler, who is the 1603 as the RB63 by consensus. He's my 1407 as my RB59. So we're like 4 running back spots higher. We're making him a priority. We want handcuffs on good teams. The Vikings are going to be at least a good offense. And Chandler has a ton of juice. He crushed the preseason. Warren Sharp says here that he faced a loaded box on 91% of his runs. This was after the first preseason game when he kind of crushed it. 55% of his runs, he was contacted at or behind the line of scrimmage. He still averaged 3 yards after contact. So he's breaking tackles. He looked explosive. He's catching passes as well, caught all 4 of his targets. So he's a guy similar to Jaylen Warren that I think can carve out a receiving role. And then on top of that is a really good handcuff behind Alexander Mattison. And then our last guy here is Luke Musgrave, rookie tight end. He is the 1703 as a tight end 27. He's my 1304 as my tight end 18. I love Luke Musgrave. People love to fade rookie tight ends. Rookie tight ends, they don't get to run routes and be starting tight ends right away. That's the biggest issue with them. Luke Musgrave, as of right now, ran 16 of 18 routes run. That's an 88% route participation. That would have been only behind Mark Andrews and George Kittle last year in terms of route participation. That's what you really need for these strong tight end seasons. It's not between, year 1, year 2, year 3. It's getting on the field and staying there. Luke Musgrave has already showed through the first however many preseason games that he's going to be on the field, starting, running routes, right? 27 of 28 snaps there with the starters, 16 of 18 routes run there. That's all really, really strong stuff. And I think that he's a great upside play because if he can't play and he sucks, you can just cut him right away and churn out that next tight end option. But Luke Musgrave to me has a ton of upside. He's a guy as well. Has decent comps where like Travis Kelce's in his comp range. He's a freak where he runs like a 4.61, 253 pounds. He's tall. He's big. He has the highest relative athletic score of all these tight ends on this list. He's comparable to like Jared Cook, Kobe Fleener, some other good names. So Luke Musgrave's a guy who could surprise in 2023. But that's going to do it for us today. Again, I know you guys have home league drafts coming up here. Make sure you check out the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. My top 200 full PPR and half PPR rankings are all there. There's a checklist. You can check off players as you go. You can print it out. You can use it on your computer. You can use it on your phone. Whatever you want to do with it, it's tiered. There's target rounds as well. So what round am I trying to draft all these players? And my targets. So all of the green guys that are highlighted in this video are bolded on that rankings list as guys that you should be targeting. So I think it's really the perfect thing for you to bring into your drafts. I'm bringing it with me into all of my high stakes, my home leagues, my subscriber leagues, all of that good stuff on top of the rankings on patreon.com/RonStewart. You can find the description. You can find in the comment section down below. But you also are getting my weekly rankings. You're getting my in-season waiver wire article where I talk through who I'm bidding how much fab on. You have my weekly rankings. I think I already said that. You have my rest of season rankings for trade requests and sending trades out where you can kind of see how does Ron value these guys rest of season. And then on top of that, you get a start-sit stream every Sunday. It's exclusive to Patreon. Some of the tiers have one-on-one advice. Some of the tiers have subscriber leagues. It's a bunch of stuff on there. Make sure you check it out. But if not, it's that time of year. Helping out the channel a ton does help out the channel a ton regardless. So leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm